بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Then to proceed, inshallah, today we begin the fifth place in the seerah, the fifth out of the 6 places in the seerah that Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab rahimahullah has included within this book in order to highlight some of the important aspects of at-Tawheed and whatever follows on from it. So with regarding to the 5th place in the seerah, then the Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul Wahaab, he says the 5th place, al-Mawdi al-Khamis wa qissatul hijrah, the 5th place, the story of the hijrah, and that it contains many benefits and admonitions. وَفِيهَا مِنَ الْفَوَائِدِ وَالْعِبَرِ, it contains many benefits and admonitions which are not known by many of those people who read it. There are many benefits in the seerah and admonitions which are not known by many of those who read it. Meaning many people read the seerah but they don't take from it the benefits and admonitions which it actually contains. So Shaykh Salih al-Fawzaan, he comments upon this opening passage, and he explains that he gives a definition of hijrah and the meaning of hijrah in the Sharia. So he says al-hijrah in the language, the meaning of it in the language is taken from al-hajar, which means abandonment, which means to abandon something. And the Shaykh then brings an ayah in Surah Al-Muddathir, the 74th ayah, Surah number 74, verse number 5, in which Allah commands the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, وَالرُّجْزَ فَحْجُرْ, which means, and the, basically all of the abomination of idols and shirk and so forth, then abandon it. Fahjur, abandon it, leave it, meaning abandon it and leave it. So here al-hajar is the same as abandonment, and from this type of hajar, from this type of abandonment within the Sharia is to abandon the people of sins and to abandon the mushrikeen, to abandon the pagans, and which means to abandon them and not to have any love for them. And then the Shaykh brings the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, al-muhajiru man hajara ma nahallahu anhu, al-muhajiru man hajara ma nahallahu anhu, that the muhajir, that the one who is a muhajir is the one who abandons what Allah has prohibited from, So this is the meaning, this is the general idea of the word al-hijrah. And as for the definition of al-hijrah in the Sharia, then the definition is given as follows. It is al-intiqalu min balad al-shirk ila balad al-islam li ajli ad-din, which is to move oneself, to transfer oneself from a land of shirk to a land of Islam for the sake of the religion. Moving from a land of shirk to a land of Islam for the sake of the religion. And this is the definition of the Sharia hijrah, the hijrah in the Sharia. Then the Shaykh says that this hijrah has a great and mighty excellence. Tied to it is excellence, a great excellence. And it is something which is tied to iman and jihad. It is like given an equal weighting, or given like an equal position alongside iman and jihad in the path of Allah. Just as Allah says, as Allah establishes in this ayah in Surah Al-Anfal, Surah number 8, verse 72, Allah says, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَحَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا. So here Allah has mentioned 3 things: iman and jihad, and He included within that al-hijrah. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَجَاهَدُوا وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَحَاجَرُوا وَجَاهَدُوا. So Allah made it, He put it on a level with al-iman and al-jihad. So this indicates the great position that is given to al-hijrah. Then the Shaykh goes on to establish that al-hijrah is something that will remain up until the hour is established. So this ruling for al-hijrah is something that will remain up until the hour is established. Then the Shaykh explains upon whom al-hijrah is obligatory. Upon whom is al-hijrah obligatory? He says that the one who is not able to openly manifest his religion in the land of the mushrikeen, then it is obligatory upon him to emigrate to a land in which he is able to openly proclaim his deen. And this is an explanation of upon whom al-hijrah is obligatory. The one who is not able to openly proclaim his deen, openly manifest his deen in the lands of the mushrikeen, it's obligatory upon him to emigrate to a land in which he is able to openly manifest his religion. And if a person is someone who has the ability to do this, so he lives in the lands of the mushrikeen and he can't openly proclaim his religion, and even though he has the ability and he doesn't move, he doesn't make the hijrah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed the following verse concerning him. Allah has revealed the following verse concerning him. Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تُوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ قَالُوا فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَضْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا فَأُولَئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمُ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. So this ayah is revealed in connection to those people who live in the lands of the mushrikeen. They can't openly proclaim their religion, but at the same time they do have the means and the ability to make the hijrah. So Allah says concerning them, verily, those whom the angels take whilst they are wronging themselves, they, meaning the angels, will say to them, in what condition were you? Where were you? In what condition were you? And they will say that we were weak and downtrodden upon the earth. And then they will say, meaning the angels will say in return, was not the earth of Allah, was not the land of Allah spacious enough for you so that you could emigrate within it? You could emigrate there, and meaning move to another place. And so therefore those people, their abode is the hellfire. And this is like a threat. It's a threat to a person in that situation. وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا, and what an evil refuge it is. What an evil refuge. Surah An-Nisa, Surah number 4, verse 97. So this is the ruling of those who have the ability to make hijrah and then they don't make the hijrah. And then we go back to the words of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab. He continues saying, Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab. So first of all he introduced the place in the seerah which is the hijrah, and then he says, however, our intention or our intent behind this issue of hijrah is only one issue from the many issues that it contains. Right? So in other words, even though Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul Wahaab has said that the hijrah has many admonitions and many great benefits and lessons, he says what we actually intend here is just to highlight one issue from its many issues. Just one issue. What is this issue? Then he explains. He says, this issue is that from the companions of Allah's Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam are those who did not make hijrah. So they didn't make hijrah, but this wasn't because they had any doubt in the religion, nor was it because they were beautifying the religion of the mushrikeen. It wasn't for any of these two reasons. It wasn't because they had a doubt in the religion, nor was it because they were praising and beautifying and glorifying the religion of the mushrikeen. It wasn't for any of these reasons. But the only reason why they remained was because of love of their families and their wealth and their land that they were living in. like people become attached and used to the land that they live in, the place that they're brought up in, the family and the land, and then the families and the wealth which they have there, and the trade and so on and so forth. So because of that, they did not make hijrah, and it was because of the love of the land, the family, and the wealth. And it wasn't because of speaking ill of Islam, or having doubt in the religion, or beautifying the deen of the mushrikeen. So these people, what happened, the Shaykh says, that when the mushrikeen, when they went to fight the Muslims from Mecca, when the mushrikeen went to fight the Muslims, and then all of the mushrikeen left to go to Badr, in the battle of Badr, then these Muslims who remained in Mecca were forced to go along with the mushrikeen. They were forced, because of the situation that they were in. So they went with the mushriks, and they weren't pleased to go with the mushriks, they were actually displeased to go with the mushriks. But because they remained in that land with the mushrikeen, they were kind of compelled to actually go with them, for fear of harm or whatever. And then some of these Muslims who came out with the mushrikeen from Mecca, they were killed by the other group of Muslims. Some of the archers who fired, they actually killed some of the Muslimin who were along with the mushrikeen. And obviously the Muslims who were firing, they didn't know that these people were not mushrikeen, but they were Muslims. So then afterwards, when the Sahaba heard that some of the dead people was such and such and such and such person who was from the Muslimin, it became very difficult upon them. They found it very hard upon themselves, the fact that they'd killed some of their Muslim brothers accidentally. And then they said, when they heard about this, they said, we have killed our brothers, qatalna ikhwanana, that we have killed our brothers. And when they made this remark, then Allah revealed this passage, Allah revealed this verse, the verse that we just read, in which Allah says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ تُوَفَّاهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ ظَالِمِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, right to the end of the verse, or to the end of the passage. There's actually 3 verses in this passage. In fact, there's 4 verses in this passage. The verse in which Allah says, verily those whom the angels take whilst they were wronging themselves, right to the end of the passage. So the point being here is, so this is the place in the seerah, this is a specific place in the seerah that Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab wants to highlight. So then Shaykh Salih al-Fawzaan, if we go back to the words of Shaykh Salih al-Fawzaan, he brings this verse, he brings the same verse that we've just read, verily those whom the angels take whilst they are wronging themselves, and they will say to them, in what state were you in? They will say that we were weak upon the earth. And then they will say, wasn't the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to emigrate in? And the angels, and then they will say, or then Allah says that those, meaning these people who fell into this situation, their abode is the hellfire, and what an evil refuge. And this is like a threat, a wa'id. So the Shaykh comments upon this verse, and he says that this is a very severe threat. This is a very severe threat, given the fact that the people to whom this is being addressed are actually Muslims. This is an extremely severe threat, given the fact that the people to whom it's being addressed are actually Muslims. And what was the thing that these Muslims did to deserve such a threat? It was because they abandoned making hijrah in a situation where they had the means to make hijrah. They abandoned it, having the excuse of loving their wealth, and loving their children, their offspring, and loving the land in which they lived in. Right? So they had this attachment to these things. And they put the love of these things ahead of making hijrah, ahead of emigrating for the sake of Allah. So Allah, the Mighty and Majestic, He gave this threat, or He made this threat in this verse, a very severe threat. And if we look at the reason why this verse was revealed, well, the Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab has just actually explained the reason why this verse was revealed. And Shaykh Salih al-Fawzaan, he then explains in his own words that this ayah was revealed when there was a battle, an expedition, the expedition of Badr, and alongside the mushrikeen there were a group of Muslims who actually remained in Mecca. They didn't make the hijrah to the Muslims in Medina, and the reason why they didn't make hijrah is because they had this attachment and they had this desire, and they kind of coveted their land and the place where they lived, and their wealth, their possessions and their offspring. So they were attached to these things. And at the same time, they did have the means. They were more than able to actually make the hijrah. But because of the love of these things, they didn't make the hijrah, and they remained with the mushrikeen. So then, when the mushriks from Mecca, they left to go to Badr to fight the Muslims, then these Muslims who remained in Mecca were kind of forced to go with them. It wasn't from their choice that they went, but they were kind of forced to go with them because of the situation that they were in. And the mushriks kind of forced them to go with them. So then when this battle took place between the Muslims and the mushrikeen, then some of the Muslims who were with the mushrikeen, they got killed, whilst they were in the ranks of the kuffar. And the Muslims didn't know who these people were, and they didn't know that they'd been killed. However, when the Muslims came to know about it, then they were very remorseful. They felt very, very sad for what had happened. And then they made the remark, قَتَلْنَا إِخْوَانَنَا, that we have killed our brothers. This is when Allah revealed this verse that we've just spoken of, that verily the angel, that though when the angels take those who are wronging themselves, they will say to them, قَالُوا فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ. So this question that the angels will ask, فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ, this question means, or this question that the angels are asking, what is it asking? It's actually asking, what was the land that you were in? Which land were you in? This is the question, this is the meaning of the question that the angels are asking. In what state were you in? Meaning, in which land were you in? And the angels weren't asking, for example, how is your iman? This wasn't the meaning of the question. When the angels say, فِيمَ كُنْتُمْ, which would mean, how were you, in which situation, it doesn't literally mean, how was your iman? How was your certainty? How was your yaqeen concerning the religion? How was your iman? They weren't asking that question. What they were asking is, what was the land that you were in? They asked them about the place. And then, these people will reply, قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَدْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا كُنَّا مُسْتَدْعَفِينَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. They will say that we were weak and downtrodden upon the earth. What do they mean by this? They mean that we were forced to go out and fight along with the mushrikeen, because we were weak and we weren't able, we didn't have the ability or the power to refrain, to hold back. We didn't have that ability. So this is their answer. And then the angels will say in return, قَالُوا أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً فَتُهَاجِرُوا فِيهَا. That they will say, was not the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to make hijrah therein? So therefore, this would have been better for them, if you had made hijrah, just like your other brothers did, they made hijrah to Medina, then you would have been safe. You would not have fell into this situation. You wouldn't have been forced to do what you were forced to do. And this would have been like a means of safety for you if you had done this. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayah, فَأُولَٰئِكَ مَأْوَاهُمْ جَهَنَّمَ وَسَاءَتْ مَصِيرًا. So this is a threat. Allah here is making a threat. This threat is attached to this behavior, whoever falls into this behavior. And what an evil refuge it is, meaning the hellfire. Then, this is in verse 97. Then Allah continues to explain further. Allah now makes an exception. Allah says, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَدْعَفِينَ إِلَّا الْمُسْتَدْعَفِينَ. Allah is now making an exception to the general rule. The general rule of whoever falls into the situation is that he has this very severe threat upon him. However, there is an exception. An exception is إِلَّا الْمُسْتَدْعَفِينَ, meaning except for those who didn't have the ability to make hijrah. They didn't have the ability, and they remained amongst the mushrikeen because they didn't actually have the means or the ability to make the hijrah. So in other words, what this explains to us, it explains to us some of the rulings of al-hijrah. The first ruling is that the one who has the ability to make hijrah from the lands of the mushrikeen, whilst he's unable to practice his religion openly, and he doesn't do so, then he falls within this threat. And the one who is in the lands of the mushrikeen, and he can't openly proclaim his religion, but he doesn't have the means, he doesn't have the ability, he doesn't have the resources and so on and so forth to make the hijrah, then this person has a genuine excuse. As Allah says here, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَدْعَفِينَ, except those who are truly weak, those who are truly weak and unable. So Allah says, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَدْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلَةً وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ سَبِيلًا. So except those from the men and the women and the children who are genuinely weak. They don't have any ability, nor do they have any way or route, and nor can they find any kind of path, nor can they be guided to any kind of path by which they can obviously get themselves out of this situation. Then Allah says, فَأُولَٰئِكَ, so Allah has made the exception for these people, and then He says, فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا وَكَانَ اللَّهُ عَفُوًّا غَفُورًا. That perhaps Allah will pardon these people, and Allah is ever pardoning and ever forgiving. And then Allah continues in the next verse. Allah says, وَمَن يُحَاجِرْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ يَجِدْ فِي الْأَرْضِ مُرَاغَمًا كَثِيرًا وَسَعَةً وَمَن يَخْرُجْ مِنْ بَيْتِهِ مُحَاجِرًا إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ ثُمَّ يُدْرِكْهُ الْمَوْتُ فَقَدْ وَقَعَ أَجْرُهُ عَلَى اللَّهِ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. So here Allah is just explaining about the those who actually do emigrate in the path of Allah, and those who leave their houses, those who abandon their houses, leave their houses, making hijrah for the sake to Allah and His Messenger, and if they then die in that situation, then that person will indeed receive his reward. Even though he hasn't completed the hijrah, but he left for hijrah, but he died, then that person will most certainly receive his reward. His reward is upon Allah, and Allah is ever forgiving, most merciful. So just explaining some of the additional situations. So this passage, the whole of this passage is Surah An-Nisa, verse 97 to verse 100. So the Shaikh Salih Al-Fawzaan says that look at this, this is regarding these people. This is what actually happened. And this story here is a very amazing and great story, meaning that this group of people, this group of Muslims who remained with the mushrikeen, even though they had their Islam was sound, and they were truthful in their Islam, there's no question about their Islam, but when they abandoned one thing from the affairs of Islam, when they abandoned this hijrah without having any genuine excuse, then look at this threat that was made upon them. Look at this severe threat that was made upon them. And look at this rebuke. Look at how they got rebuked. Look at how they got criticized and rebuked by the angels when the angels came to take their souls. So what does this show? What this whole incident and this whole thing that took place, what does it prove and what does it show? This shows that it is not permissible for a muwahhid, it's not permissible for a Muslim, a muwahhid, that he takes this affair lightly, that he takes this affair easily, and that he bees with the mushrikeen, he's with them like physically in terms of location and so on and so forth, even if it is not out of love for them, even if he doesn't love them, but he loves his wealth, his offspring, his house and all, and whatever it is that he's attached to, he doesn't make hijrah because of those reasons, right? That this affair, he should not take it lightly. And then Allah brings another threat. Allah says, قُلْ إِنْ كَانَ آبَاؤُكُمْ وَأَبْنَاؤُكُمْ وَإِخْوَانُكُمْ وَأَزْوَاجُكُمْ وَعَشِيرَتُكُمْ وَأَمْوَالٌ اقْتَرَفْتُمُوهَا وَتِجَارَةٌ تَخْشَوْنَ كَسَادَهَا وَمَسَاكِنُ تَرْضَوْنَهَا أَحَبَّ إِلَيْكُم مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَجِهَادٍ فِي سَبِيلِهِ فَتَرَبَّصُوا حَتَّى يَأْتِيَ اللَّهُ بِأَمْرِهِ وَاللَّهُ لَا يَهْدِي الْقَوْمَ الْفَاسِقِينَ. This threat is in Surah At-Tawbah, Surah 9, verse 24. Allah says, say, if your fathers and your sons and your brothers and your spouses, your wives or your husbands, and your close relatives, and the wealth that you have acquired or gained, and the trade in which you fear a decline, and the places in which you are pleased with, meaning the places in which you live in, if all of that is more beloved to you than Allah and His Messenger, and making jihad in His path, then just you wait. Just wait till Allah comes with His command. So this is the threat. And Allah does not guide the sinful people. Allah does not guide the sinful people. So this verse, and also the other passage that we've just been through, what does it show? It shows to us that it is not permissible to put ahead or to give precedence to the love of one's wealth and one's offspring, to put it ahead of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to put it ahead of al-hijrah, and when al-hijrah becomes wajib, and to put it ahead of making or striving and struggling in the path of Allah, the mighty and majestic. And then the Shaykh says, many people who actually read these verses and read this passage, they read it but they don't actually truly understand it. They don't reflect upon it, and they don't understand it. Okay, back now to the words of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab. So Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab, he mentioned this incident, and after mentioning this incident, he then says, whoever reflects upon this story, and whoever reflects upon the statement of the Sahaba, because the Sahaba said, qatalna ikhwanana, this is the remark that they said, that we have killed our brothers. The Shaykh says that if the Sahaba who made this remark, so the Sahaba who said qatalna ikhwanana, that we have killed our brothers, if these Sahaba had knew that those Muslims who were with the mushrikeen, that if they had heard that those Muslims who were with the mushrikeen had said something about the religion, or that they had made some kind of praise or beautification of the religion of the mushrikeen, then they would never have made this remark. They would never have said qatalna ikhwanana. Right? What is the point? What is the point that's trying to be made here? The point that's trying to be made here, that Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab is saying, as Shaykh Salih al-Fawzaan explains, is that those Sahaba were in that situation. They didn't say anything wrong about Islam. They didn't say anything evil about Islam. Nor did they praise the deen of the mushrikeen. None of this came from them. And the Sahaba who were in Medina, they never heard anything like that from them either. But if they did hear anything like that from them, if they did hear anything of the sort, they would never ever have said qatalna ikhwanana, we have killed our brothers. Why? Because to do such a thing, that would be kufr, that would be disbelief, as Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul Wahaab explains. He continues and he says, because so Shaykh al-Islam says that whoever reflects upon this story and the story of the saying of the Sahaba and the saying of the Sahaba that we have killed our brothers, then that person will know that if it had reached them that there was some speech from those Muslims in Mecca regarding the religion, or if there was some speech from them in which they beautified the deen of the mushrikeen, then they would never have said, we have killed our brothers. They wouldn't have made that remark. Why? Because Allah, as Shaykh al-Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul Wahaab continues, because verily Allah has explained to them whilst they were in Mecca before the hijrah, right? So Allah revealed in Mecca before the hijrah that to do such a thing, meaning to speak about the religion or to beautify the deen of the mushrikeen, that is disbelief after having iman. That would have been disbelief after having iman, because Allah said, due to His saying, "Man kafara billah min ba'di imanihi illa man ukriha wa qalbuhu mutma'innun bil iman." Right? That whoever disbelieved in Allah after having iman. So Allah is speaking of the situation, and then Allah makes an exception, except for the one who is compelled to do so, whilst his heart is secure with iman. It's safe and secure with iman. So obviously this refers to the person who, under the threat of death or harm or whatever, he's compelled to utter statements of disbelief, but his heart is firm upon iman. So that person is not included within this. But the one who makes such remarks, then this person is, he's disbelieved in Allah after having iman. And so the point being here now, if we go back to this story, Shaykh Islam Muhammad bin Abdul Wahaab explains, if we go back to this story and we find like a really very, very amazing point, a very strong point. He says that when we go back and we look in the speech of Allah regarding these people, when the angel said in that same verse, Fima kuntum, right? This same question that the angel asked. The angel said, if you look, the angel said Fima kuntum, like in which land were you? The angels didn't say, how is your tasdeeq? Allah, angels weren't asking, how is your belief? How is your belief in Allah? The angels didn't ask that. Rather, they asked, in which land were you in? In which land were you in? And then the angels will reply, these people reply, قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. قالوا كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. And then what happened was that the angels, when they replied to these Muslims, when they made this excuse, the angels didn't say, you have lied. They didn't say to these people, you have lied. Let's look at this point. They didn't say that you've lied. Right? So, if you look at the situation here, and you compare it to another situation which is explained in another hadith, the situation in which Allah and the angels will say to the one who made jihad in the path of Allah. This is the hadith where the first three people who will be judged. The mujahid, who will say to Allah that I made jihad in your path up until I was killed. And then Allah will say to him, you have lied. And the angels will say to him, you have lied. Right? Rather, you fought so that it might be said, what a brave person he is. And then a similar thing will be said to the alim, the one who's an alim, and the one who gave charity. It will be said to him, you have lied, but rather you only acted that it might be said, that you only learned that it might be said, an alim, or you only gave charity that it might be said, what a generous person you are. Right? If you look in this hadith, here these people were Muslims, they made an excuse, and they were treated as liars. They were treated as liars. They were treated as people who have lied. Whereas here, in this situation that we're speaking of here, when the angel said to them, Fima kuntum, in which situation, which land were you in? When they said that we were weak and we were downtrodden, we were weak and oppressed upon the earth, the angels didn't say that you have lied. They didn't say you've lied. Why? Because what they were saying was truthful. They were weak and they were downtrodden. They weren't able, in that situation. Right? It was the truth. But they abandoned one thing. They left one thing, which is to make hijrah. Even though they had the means. And why did they do this? Because of the love of their wealth and their possessions, and they put that ahead of Allah and His Messenger. Right? So the point, what is the point that's being made? The point that's being made here is, look at how that these Muslims were speaking the truth. They were speaking the truth, and even then, in that situation, they received such a severe threat. Right? So this is the point that's actually being made here. And so Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzaan, he then comments upon these words. All of these were the words of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab. And then so Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzaan, he comments himself, and he says that these Sahaba from the Muslims in Medina, the only reason why they said qatalna ikhwanana, we've killed our brothers, was because those people in Makkah who were with the mushrikeen, they were actually upon their religion. They were firm upon their deen. They were firm upon their deen. And it was never ever mentioned about them that that they're kind of allied with the mushrikeen, or they inclined towards the mushrikeen, or that they praised the mushrikeen, or that none of this was mentioned about them. Rather, we know that those Muslims in Mecca, that they hated the religion of the mushrikeen. And we know that they were upon Tawheed, and we know that they were sincere to Allah, and they didn't have any nifaq or hypocrisy with them. However, they just left one thing from the religion, just one thing, due to putting their wealth and their love of their offspring and whatever ahead of obedience to Allah. And for that reason, Allah criticized them, Allah rebuked them, and Allah gave them a threat. And then the angels didn't ask them about their iman or their aqidah. How was your aqidah? What was your aqidah? How was your iman? They didn't ask them about this. They didn't ask, because the angels know that these Muslims were already upon a correct aqidah and a correct iman, but the angels only asked them about the place in which they were in. Which place were you in? And this was to show that it wasn't permissible for them to remain in a place whilst they had the ability to move from that place, to make hijrah from that place. So the angels So when the angels asked this question and the Muslims replied, the angels didn't say, you have lied, you are not Muslimin, you are not believer, you are not Muslims, you are not believers. They didn't say that. They just said, in which land were you in? They asked them about the place in which they were, that they were. And obviously they were present in the land in which they left alongside the mushrikeen, even though they disliked it. And when they did this, this was the fact that they remained in that land. That was the very reason why the kuffar were able to dominate them and to force them to come out and to fight against the Muslimin. Right? So the Shaykh then says, so it's not permissible to accompany them and to be like this with them, and to come out with them, due to one's love for one's wealth and one's family and so on and so forth. This kind of thing is not permissible, and to kind of behave with them in a manner in order to look after one's interests like wealth and family, whatever, just for that reason. All of this is not permissible. Then Shaykh al-Islam, now we go back to the words of Shaykh al-Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab rahimahullah, and he says, as for those people, meaning as for these Sahaba or these Muslims that this is in reference to, the angels never declared them as liars. The angels never said, you have lied. Rather, the angels replied and they said, قالوا ألم تكن أرض الله واسعة فتهاجروا فيها. They said, was not the earth of Allah spacious enough for you to make hijrah therein? And the Shaykh says, so this is obviously very, 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 very clear. And the Shaykh says, what makes it even more clear, what makes this even more clear to the one who knows and the one who is ignorant, is the verse that comes after it. If we look at the verse that comes after it, which is the verse that we've already looked at, in which Allah says, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ وَالْوِلْدَانِ لَا يَسْتَطِيعُونَ حِيلَةً وَلَا يَهْتَدُونَ سَبِيلًا. This is the next verse in which Allah makes an exception. Allah says, except those who are truly weak and oppressed and downtrodden from the men and the women and the children, who don't have any way, they don't have any plan or any way, nor do they have any path, or nor can they be guided to any path by which they can remove themselves from this situation. This verse, the Shaykh continues, says that this makes it clear that these people are outside of the threat. These people are outside of the threat, meaning these people who have a genuine excuse, they genuinely do not have the means, they genuinely cannot leave, they don't have the means, they don't have the resources, they can't leave. These people are outside of the threat, they're not included within the threat. So when a person comes to realize this, and the fact that Allah has made this exception, then a person, there won't remain any doubt with him at all. He will not have any doubt with him at all. However, this will only be for the person who seeks knowledge. This is only for the person who seeks knowledge and wants to understand these affairs. As for the one who doesn't seek knowledge and doesn't want this clarity, then Allah says about such a person, Summum bukmun umyun fahum la yarji'un. That such a person is deaf, dumb and blind, and they do not return. Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, verse 18. So the Shaykh says, commenting upon these two sentences, he says, Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzaan, meaning that there is no excuse for anybody except for the one who left hijrah, he abandoned hijrah whilst being incapable of it. He was incapable, didn't have the means. Then this person is excused due to the verse that we've just read, in which Allah makes the exception, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنَ الرِّجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ, to the end of the ayah, فَأُولَٰئِكَ عَسَى اللَّهُ أَن يَعْفُوَ عَنْهُمْ. Then those, perhaps Allah will pardon them. And then the Shaykh continues and he says, yes, when the Muslims make this kind of mixing with the kuffar, in which there is no excuse, then this is a matter which is not permissible. Rather, it's vital that the land of the Muslimin is distinguished from the lands of the kuffar. The borders and so on and so forth, it's distinct, the two things are distinct. And that a Muslim doesn't unnecessarily, or for no valid reason, mix with the mushrik. As Allah's Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, لا تتراءى ناراهما لا تتراءى ناراهما. The meaning of this hadith, which is that that you should not, the meaning, you should be as far away as possible. That you should be as far away as possible from them. And then back to the words of Shaykh Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab, he then finishes by saying that whoever understands this subject, whoever understands this place in the seerah, and also whatever came before it, right? So whoever understands this fifth place in the seerah and whatever came before it, then he will understand the words of Al-Hasan al-Basri. The words of Al-Hasan al-Basri, who said, ليس الإيمان بالتحلي ولا بالتمني ولكن ما وقر في القلوب وصدقته الأعمال. The meaning of this statement is that Iman isn't something which is just by, like adornment and beautification, or like a desire or a craving, but rather it is something which falls in the heart. It's something which it establishes in the heart, and then the outward actions prove its truthfulness. The outward actions prove that it's actually true, meaning that it begins in the heart, and the outward actions, when you start seeing the outward actions, that proves that it is truthful in the heart. This is what is Iman. And so the Shaykh explains, Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzaan comments upon this. He says that Iman, what is Iman? Is whatever is proven true in one's actions. That is Iman, right? Whatever is proven true by one's actions, that is Iman. And from these actions is Al-Hijrah. Al-Hijrah is from the outward actions. And the Shaykh says this is a refutation of the Murji'ah. This is a refutation of the Murji'ah, those who say that Iman, that it is sufficient just to have Iman in the heart, or to have Iman in the heart and upon the tongue. And the Shaykh says this is not correct. Rather, just to have belief in the heart and to express with the tongue, this is not sufficient. Rather, there must be action alongside with it. And then the Shaykh says, and back to the words of Shaykh Islam Muhammad Ibn Abdul Wahaab, he then finishes this section by saying that this is because Allah the Most High said, إِلَيْهِ يَسْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. That to him arises the good speech, and the good action he raises it. And so Shaykh Salih Al-Fawzaan says that when he says إِلَيْهِ يَسْعَدُ الْكَلِمُ الطَّيِّبُ, إِلَيْهِ meaning up to Allah, that the good speech, meaning the things like dhikr and reciting the Quran and tasbih, glorifying Allah, and tahleel, saying la ilaha illallah, and every good speech, all of it good speech, then it rises up to Allah the Mighty Majestic. And likewise commanding the good, prohibiting the evil, all of these things which are done with the tongue, teaching the people the beneficial knowledge, all of that is from al-kalim al-tayyib, from the good speech, the good word. And likewise the good speech with the people, saying good things to the people and saying good things to the relatives, like Allah commands, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا, meaning say good things to the people. Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah number 2, verse 83. And Allah says regarding the parents, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا, say to the two parents a noble word, a noble, respectable word. The Surah Al-Isra, Surah number 17, verse 23. So all of this is from the goodly speech, is from the goodly speech. And all of this rises to Allah. However, the Shaykh says that this doesn't rise to Allah by itself. Just on its own, it doesn't rise by itself. Rather, this thing is not the only thing that just goes up. Rather, the action also rises. Because Allah said in the next sentence, in the next part, وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ, وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ. So the Shaykh says that this is a refutation of the Murji'ah. So look at how the Shaykh has used this verse as a proof of the refutation of the Murji'ah. So he first said that the good word rises to Allah, and he didn't stop there. He also said وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ وَالْعَمَلُ الصَّالِحُ يَرْفَعُهُ, that the good action he raises it. So this is a refutation of the Murji'ah. This shows that the outward action is something which proves and establishes a person's Iman. So this is the end of this. This is the end of the fifth place in the seerah, and the point, the general principle or the general point that we extract from this story, or the point that's been made, is that look at these Sahaba, look at these Muslims who they remained in Mecca, right, for no other reason except they were attached to their wealth, to their land, to their motherland, so to speak, and to their offspring, and they had a love of these things which made them not to make hijrah, right? And besides this one thing, there was nothing else that they could be faulted for. Their iman was sound, their aqidah was sound. They didn't love the mushrikeen, they didn't praise the deen of the mushrikeen, they didn't speak about Islam, they didn't speak about the Muslims in Medina, right? None of that was known from them at all, right? And they were upon iman, and so they loved Allah and His Messenger, but there was just one thing that they fell into, which was putting the love of their wealth and offspring and whatever ahead of loving Allah and His Messenger. It wasn't even loving the mushrikeen ahead of loving, no, it wasn't that. It was just loving, because they hated the mushrikeen. It was loving these things, other than putting this love before Allah and His Messenger, as a result of which they remained with the mushriks, as a result of which they then fell into the situation where the kuffar were able to dominate them and to force them to come and fight with the Muslimin. That was the only thing. And despite all of that, look at this very, very severe threat that was placed upon the Sahaba. What is the point being made from all of this? The point being made from all of this, the point that the Shaikh Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab is coming to at the end, is that the iman which is in the heart has to be proven with the outward actions. The iman which is in the heart has to be proven with outward actions. So this is the end of this lesson, inshallah, and we'll continue with the sixth place in the seerah, inshallah ta'ala, in the next lesson, and inshallah we'll stop there for today. Yeah. This book is called silsillah sharh rasail. It's like a compilation of his explanations of about 6 books, of 6 little works of Shaikh Islam Muhammed Ibn Abdul Wahaab. Right, so other things he's got in this book is explanation of the 6 principles, al-usul al-sitta, explanation of the 4 rules, al-qawaid al-arba', explanation of the meaning of Taghut. So he's got like 6 little books, benefits from Surah Al-Fatiha. So he's got 6 or 7 books within here. It's a compilation of all his explanations on these little works. Yeah? Okay. Barakallahu. Assalamu alaikum.